Hello and welcome once again to Sarva Gunn Sampann. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast where I have the opportunity to spotlight the journeys of women of India and the diaspora. My guest today is a woman who values integrity, diligence, organization skills, and respect for rules. Her strengths include communication, collaboration, and a deep desire to make a positive difference to someone's life. I'm delighted to welcome Mona Alag to the show. Mona ji, it's great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful thing that you've started, and I wish you a lot of success in this.
Thank you very much. You know, it's guests like you who come to my podcast and make this show what it is. So I cannot wait to get started. On that note, our first segment is all about your childhood. In Bachchpan, then we talk all about your childhood and learn and glean insights about what helped you become the person you are.
Okay. My childhood was like that of millions of children in India. I'm the second of four siblings, second daughter, born into a Sikh family in Delhi. And like I said, it was like any other childhood of millions of girls in India, except with a little difference, if I may say so. My father was from a westernized sort of family. He was a Delhiite from St. Stephen's College. He was, the entire family was slightly westernized, I would say, quite westernized. And my mother came from a very aristocratic family of Lahore. And they deeply rooted in tradition and culture and religion and faith. And not so much from daddy's side. There are a few things that have impacted me, which are directly linked to my childhood. Whenever my grandfather on daddy's side, Pitaji, whenever he came to visit, he just wanted to instill some culture in us and some good habits and table manners and how we dressed. So that's where the Western thing came in. And he would try to, first he would come laden with a stack of 100 rupee bills in his pocket. And we were more interested in that than anything else. And he would make us have breakfast with a knife and fork, a fried egg over toast. Who does that to a 5-year-old? But that's who he was. And the toast is flying somewhere, the yolk is leaking and all. But if you succeeded in his test, he gave you a 1 rupee note. So that was our motivation. And I distinctly remember his smell, his loving demeanor, just a gentle sweetheart. He went to England on a scholarship and went globetrotting after that. And so that emphasized the Western culture a little more. Mother's side, on the other hand, like I said, was deeply rooted in tradition and culture and all things Indian. They lived in a Haveli that was from ancient times. And one thing that impacted my life was her experience when the viceroys used to have meetings at their Haveli. And, the locks were embedded in the doors. So when they would turn the key, they would look through those little peepholes at what was happening inside. And my mother remembered, she said there were these beautiful ladies in their frocks and dresses, and they would be speaking such lovely English, which was something at that time she didn't know. And she said, I promised myself that when I get married, if I have daughters, I'm going to make sure they learn English. I want them to speak English just the way these women are speaking. And here we are. So Daddy was a roadways contractor who traveled a lot in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, but she never left home. Home was Pune. She never left home because she didn't want her education to be disrupted. That was I think the reason that we had the Western culture as well as the Indian culture, which we lived, taught us adaptability. We took to each one of them with equal ease. When Pitaji was there, we went along with what he would say and what he would want us to do. And when we went to our aunts and uncles in Punjab, it was a totally different atmosphere. But we enjoyed that as much as we did the other. And a couple of things that my grandfather told us very early on was if we were stepping out when he was visiting, he would always tell us, go and get dressed. Why do we need to get dressed? We're just going to get ice cream. And he would say, when you step out of the house, go dress up as if you're going to run into the viceroy. In other words, always be well groomed and well dressed. And I remember that to this day. And the second thing was a comment he made to my aunt, whom he was not very happy with that day because she was celebrating the birthday of her dog. And she said, I get bored, so I have to do something. And he said, intelligent people never get bored. So we made sure we never told him we were bored, because that meant we were not intelligent. So like my childhood was a normal childhood, but with this dual culture, which worked to our advantage, I think. We adapted to each one easily, and that carried on through our lives. Schooling was always in convent Catholic schools, colleges, as to the promise that my mother had made to herself. Loved music, wanted to go to every concert there was. Ghulam Ali Sahab and a whole host of classical singers. I loved music. I still love music. That's my childhood. A very enjoyable, surrounded with cousins on mummy's side as well as daddy's side, and very close. We had a very good, happy childhood.
That's wonderful to know. When you talk about the lasting impressions some comments make when you're growing up, and in your case, the influences that you picked up from the comments that were made by your grandfather and your close relatives, that those stayed with you.
And somehow, however you do it, but you do impart these experiences to your children. And sometimes in ways you don't even know you've done it. And my mother always would say, not in so many words, her own words, that tomorrow is another day. If something is overwhelming you or whatever, she would always say, tomorrow is another day. And some time ago, our daughter Pooja, I asked her, I said, we learned things of words of wisdom that stayed with us, which our parents would utter, and they wouldn't even know they were imparting wisdom to us. We learned it by osmosis. And I said, is there anything that happened in our home that you took to, and you hang your hat on that? And she said, yes, tomorrow is another day. She says, I don't know how or why, but I just learned that from you. Tomorrow is another day. So it was, thank you, Mom.
Yeah, that got deeply ingrained.
It's right. And it's carrying on through her children too.
When we were growing up, we probably didn't pay so much attention to these words or these pearls of wisdom. But in hindsight, it's as you carry forward in your life and look back, you realize that something's really stuck with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. At that time, when he would, like Pitaji would say, you'll meet the viceroy. And we'd say, what's a viceroy? And why would we want to meet him? But that instilled in us good grooming and always be presentable.
I can just visualize. So when you've painted that picture of an era where your mother was growing up, grandmother was growing up, and your grandparents, and what India looked like back then, and
Right.
for you to imbibe great traits from both sides of the family, gave you a very balanced perspective.
Yeah. And little did I know that I would be crossing the ocean and coming here, where the Western thought process would help me adapt here.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely help you in more ways than one.
Yes.
We'll see that as we go into our next segment, which is Ye Kahaan Aa Gaye Hum. And I know that's meant to evoke that laughter. But we would love to know what happened after you finished your high school.
Schooling was in Pune,
No.
and college was in Calcutta.
Got it.
So we lived in Calcutta, Durgapur. I was always interested in English literature and Greek mythology. So those were things that still interest me. We lived in Durgapur when my father was setting up a factory there. And after that, we came back to Delhi. And I must have been about 20 or 21. So then, all the forces get together, the aunts and the friends of aunts and your mother's friends, finding a suitable boy. And I didn't want to come overseas. I was very comfortable in India. And till today, I just love being in India. I don't have to do anything. But that's where my heart is. And so if there was any offer that would come or something, it was, no, I'm not going to India. But how ironic. I married an NRI. It just happened. My mother, my aunt and my husband's aunt, they were in some kitty lunch group and they exchanged ideas and talking about the families. And one had a nephew who was coming to India from USA, and the other one had a niece who was coming from Durgapur to Delhi. So we met. Of course, I was not told that this was a setup because I would not have gone. I was totally against. I'm not a vegetable that you have to go and show me to somebody, no. But coming from that traditional background, we didn't have a say in it, but got married. We met on the 1st of June, 1970. I was engaged on the 5th of June and got married on the 21st of June. So how's that for a, Pat Mangani, Bochat Mangani, Pat Bia? And I, on the 17th of July, I landed in USA. The transition wasn't difficult at all because language was not a problem. I took to the ways of this country quite easily. Again, a reflection of my childhood. The one thing that I had trouble with was my accent and the terms we used. I went to a store and I asked him for aluminium foil. And he said, "Ma'am, what is that?" And I said, aluminium foil? I'm sorry, we don't have it. And he had some vegetables. So I asked him, "Do you have ladyfingers?" And again, that confused look, what is she talking about? And then there was something else I asked him for, and brinjal. And he said, "No, ma'am, we don't carry those vegetables. I've never heard of it." So that was my challenge. Coming from a very faith-based background, we used to go to the Gurdwara, so which was in somebody's party room in an apartment. And there, before I knew it, they had given me the position of the president of Guru Nanak Foundation. I didn't know what I was doing, but that's where I landed up. And a gentleman there who was also from Calcutta, he and I had that little bond that we were from Calcutta. And so we would do a radio show together, things like that. And he said, "Why don't you apply for a job at a radio station where, all you had to do was read advertisements or introduce the guests or something?" I was rejected. I had the interview. I was rejected. Why? Am I not good enough for this job? And he said, "It's your accent. You have a totally British accent, and people will not be listening to what you are selling. They'll be listening to how you're talking. It was, thanks, Mom. You wanted me to learn English. Like I said, we did a radio show and stuff, and also that was quite interesting and quite easily, done. The other challenge I faced was Americans didn't know too much, rather anything about India. So whenever we met with my husband's colleagues and their families and office picnics and parties and stuff, when they were told, oh, this couple is from India, she has just come from India, and they would look, oh, do you live in tree houses in India? I had just had it. I said, yes, we do. So she said, how do you go up and down? And I said, we have elevators to travel up and down. Do you have ice cream in India? So it was very annoying, but at the same time, you don't know what you don't know. So they had never heard of these things. They thought of, India being the land of snakes and snake charmers and all that, whatever their mindset was. So that was something that was a little difficult to deal with, but got through it. My first 2 or 3 experiences in the United States were, I don't know what you would call them. This was the time of Bangladesh was formed, and USA was just coming out of Vietnam. And one of our friends, Shiv Agarwal, said, Mona, the plane dealer is going to call you because you're interested in political stuff. And it was a very difficult situation where one of the pilots of the United States Air Force was being punished, was given an dishonorable discharge, whereas they were lauding another person from another country who was guilty of war crimes. And I gave them this long lecture. I said, USA is this is a contradiction of terms. You punish one of your own and you're lauding someone else who's committed war crimes also. This isn't right. And a lot of stuff I editorialized. And what Shiv had told me was, it's just going to be a little thing on page 10 or 11. The next day, plain dealer, front page, picture, recent immigrant accuses USA of double standards. Okay. That's when my husband got very upset and he said, what are you doing? I said, you were there. This is what Shiv told me and I didn't see anything wrong with it. He said, next time, no talking to anybody. So I said, okay. Then 2 weeks later, I was watching Dorothy Fulltime, the grand dame of journalists all over the world. She happened to live in Cleveland, and she had a 5-minute segment on the afternoon news where she talked of travels and stuff. And she just come back from India. Didn't have a single decent thing to say about India. She's, I didn't know whether there were more dogs, cows, or people on the roads of India. I wasn't having any of that. So what did I do? I called her office and I protested. I said, you didn't find anything right with India? Why did you go there then? I didn't know what I was talking about. I was just furious for her saying this. And I hate India bashers. With a passion, I hate them. So the next day, I got a call from her office saying, would you like to talk to her? Would you like to come to the studio and have this conversation with her? What I knew wasn't even a drop in the ocean. She had interviewed world figures. And I said, no, I don't think I want to do that. But I told my husband about it. And he said, if you don't learn to keep quiet, you're going on a long vacation to India. Stop doing all this. So these were my 2 experiences on, speaking my mind. And the third one was Mrs. Gable took me under her wing to just sort of, I learned the ropes from her. And she took me to Make Company in downtown. And she was buying towels and sheets and stuff. They looked nice. And she said, why don't you get some? And I said, okay. I bought 2 towels And when I went to the checkout counter, the gentleman said, cash or charge. And I didn't know what that meant. So she said, do you want to pay cash or do you want to charge it? I said, what does charge it mean? She says, you don't pay for it now, you pay later. And I said, great, yes, I'll charge it. Thinking this is the land of, milk and honey and free towels. So bought the towels, came home, and I showed them to my husband. And I said, see, I got these towels. Aren't they nice? And that's good. You got them. How much were they? I said, I didn't have to pay for them. I said, they were free. He said, nothing is free. You paid for them. I said, I charged it. So he was horrified that I'd learned the language of plastic very soon. We went to May Company 2 days later, and we paid the bill, and he said, you are never to charge anything again. So these were different yet interesting experiences I had. But all in all, it was fun. It was fun learning the ways of this country. And
I have to give it to you for standing your ground and speaking your mind. I mean, good for you that, you decided to go and give a piece of your mind, because you couldn't stand anybody bashing India.
I don't know.
And I know that generations of immigrants who have come to this country have faced that, at least up until now. I think things are beginning to change. There's a resurgence of, pride, and the new generation, the younger generation, has experienced things differently. So, so unless you came from that country, unless you lived in that land, you would not be able to explain, the subtleties and the differences that as a native to somebody that belonged to this country and had absolutely no idea, because nothing to compare. It was like apples and oranges. So
oranges, right? Absolutely. But till today, it's my country. It's my home. If you have something negative to say it in the other room, not in front of me. I still get very upset when people who don't know. You should make an informed decision, make an informed statement. That's all I ask. Get some information, then weigh the information, then speak your mind. But anyhow.
Yeah. Let bygones be bygones. And we have to thank the internet for that, because I think there's at least, there's no excuse for not not be able to get information. You've got it out there, it's at your fingertips.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's a different, it's a different world now. No. Yeah.
So that's great. And what did you do after that? So you've been in this country for almost 4-5 decades. I imagine.
5 decades.
5 decades.
5 decades. Yeah.
And what did you do in terms of work? So talk to me about that.
I never joined any workforce. I wasn't a professional. I was not a professional. And the family that my husband came from is a very old-fashioned, traditional family. And they would have, and I didn't want to change anybody's mindset. That was not something I was comfortable doing. My mother-in-law was from the old school, who had gone to school and she was in 2nd grade when they pulled her out. So she said, people think I'm uneducated, but I went to school for 2 years. That's her background. So a daughter-in-law of the family working would have meant the son is not making enough money. So she had to work over there. And my husband didn't want. He wanted a homemaker who would raise a family, the traditional kind. He was a very traditional person. So we had a son, Bobby, Deepak, and I was busy raising Bobby. Then Pooja was born 5 years later. And we got into this thing of social circles, making friends and having parties. And so the first, I think, 15 years were spent in finding ourselves enjoying ourselves, shopping like crazy, going to India, wanting to buy saris and suits and stuff and all. So it was a very enjoyable, stunningly frivolous time that we just had a ball.
Yeah.
And I think my first experience with reality of children growing up in this country was when I think our son Bobby, he wanted to go to some friend's house, and another friend of his, but his mom called me, and she asked, "Is Bobby going?" And I said, "Why? Is Bud going?" And she said, "No, that because the parents are not going to be home." And Bobby and I had a conversation, and I said, "No, you can't go." And they always threw at me, "That's because we are Indians. That's the Indian parent talking." And I couldn't explain to him that it's a parental concern. But the discussion, we locked horns. And he said, "Mom, it's just that you think differently. I think differently. Your thinking is that of an Indian mom. Mine is not. Mine is that of a kid in America." And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, "You know what? Basically, what he's saying is right. We're all Indian parents with American kids. Their tastes might be Indian. They would wear Indian clothes to go to the temple or the Gurdwara. They would eat Indian food because that's what we put on the table. But their thinking is not Indian. Their thinking is American." And it's like throwing somebody in the water and saying, "Don't get wet." They are going to absorb what this culture is offering because that's where they're living. If we don't want them to be progressive in their thinking and express their views to us, we should just take them back. We're sort of making them develop two personalities. At home, they were Indian kids in an Indian family. But outside, they had to fit in. So they were developing two personalities. And that's when that was my first foray into tackling an issue and my first connection with FICA. So I had arranged, with I think 3 sets of parents or 4 sets of parents and 4 teenagers, like Bobby's age, 16, 15, 16. And we had a workshop, communication between parents and children. Because somewhere we had to meet halfway. We could not have it our way, and we were not willing to have it their way. So there had to be a change somewhere. So we had two workshops with this, where a question was put forth to the parents and how they would handle it, what their answers would be, and then what the children felt, that what they wanted our answers to be. So it was quite a good experiment, because what the children were telling us was absolutely right. But that also gave them a little insight into why we were saying no. And not everything is India versus America. There's a fine line. We were talking as parents. So that was my first foray into, holding seminars or informational workshops. And then right after that, there was a young girl who called me, daughter of 2 physicians, and she said, "Auntie, I don't know how to handle this. Every time I want to go out with my friends on a Friday evening or a Saturday evening," she was also 15 or 16. She said, we've had our dinner. I put the dishes away. That was her duty. And she says, "My mother doesn't want me to go out. She's always, you have to fold the laundry. You have to do the laundry. You have to mop the floors." And she said, she just doesn't, she makes me do too much work. And we thought about it. And then we had another workshop where it was one-on-one. And why does your mother not want you to go out? It's not that she has all this work for you, but it's late in the evening. It's 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the winters. It's your safety that she's concerned about. You're not understanding the reason she's saying it. You're just harping on what she is doing. And you're playing the victim card very easily. Do you understand that it is your safety that is her concern? And after 2 or 3 sessions of one-on-one, the children understood that. They got it, that yes, I said, why don't you tell her you want to go out in the afternoon instead of after dinner? Go to your friend's house or go to the mall, go in the afternoon and see if it's the same thing. That changed. So the communication, I felt, was very important. We had to listen to the children. We had to listen to them. And they had to accept our point of view also. When our daughter, Pooja, at 16, wanted to go to a movie with her school friends, my husband asked me, are the boys going to be there? And I said, they're all from the same class. They're all going. They're all in school together. So, no, she's not going. She didn't go. And I tried to, I was United Nations in the family. I tried to, have this discussion with him that you can't do this. You can't do it. If there are 20 kids going together, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And she lives in a co-ed world. She doesn't live in a girl's world only. So you've got to let her experience the company of people. It's not whether you've got to go beyond the gender. It's not she can only be with girls. How is she going to live in this world? It's a co-ed world. And with Pooja, I told her, I said, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not apologizing for the rules in our family, because your father comes from a family where when his friends or his father's friends, Papaji's friends, came to the house, the women all went into the back room. That's what he has grown up with. I'm not apologizing, and I'm not going to ask him to change. I am talking to him, and we will come to a common meeting ground, but this is the way it's going to be. And she would always say, I know it's not enough to be a good girl. I have to be daddy's good little Indian girl. And like I said, I made no apologies. I said, this is the way it is. That's the way it's going to stay.
And you tried your best to be the peacekeeper and,
Yes.
sure that you were smoothing out any, ruffled feathers.
Exactly.
It's a clash of cultures, right? I mean,
totally.
Especially in those days, I would imagine, if you compare it with now, because there weren't that many Indians, right? The population was still sparse, not anything near to what it is today.
What it is today, yeah.
So a huge expectation on the kids. I think that was that must have been very burdensome. I'm trying to think from their perspective. It's as challenging as it is for the parents in those days. It would have been. I think for the kids, it would have been even more difficult.
I think it was the worst challenge for the kids, because one, no on our part, and the trajectory just changed for what they had planned. Excuse me, what they had planned, what they wanted to do. If daddy says no, mama says no, we can't do it. So it was very difficult. When I said I experienced both sides growing up, I understood what she was going through. And a lot of times, she says, my parents were my constant dates for a Saturday evening, because her friends they were going out with their friends, groups of friends. But if she didn't have any plans to go with one of her Indian friends or have a sleepover with one of them, we wouldn't go. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving her alone and having a good time when my daughter is sitting twiddling her thumbs. Yeah. So it was a difficult time, But then as they started to drive and make their own friends, and we realize that we have imparted a good sense of values and morals. You have to let them go. You have to let them go then. And that's when I told, I think, Bobby and Pooja, both of them, that you're going to meet a lot of people. You're going to meet a lot of friends. You're going to make a lot of friends here. All you need to know is their first name and their phone number, because I didn't want the regional barriers that we face in India. This one's a Sindhi, this one's a Jain, this one's a Gujarati, this one's a Punjabi. I wanted them to be above all that. I said, you will meet friends, you'll make friends. Bobby used to go to these Garba dances all the time. And I said, don't worry about the last names. Don't worry about where they're from. And he says, why would I care where they come from? So, but that's what I'm saying. You have to be beyond that. And the second thing is, you can have a best friend who's not the same gender as you. So look beyond gender, look beyond regional differences. And whatever we have taught you, if we have, maybe I shouldn't use the word taught you, whatever values have been imparted to you by osmosis, I hope and pray that they will stay with you. And the last name that you have inherited from your father is a very honorable name. It's a respectable name. It's a prominent name. Don't do anything to bring shame to that name. It's a name your great, great, great grandfathers have left for you. Don't bring dishonor to it. And touch wood, things have been okay.
Yeah, and you obviously were way ahead of your times. Back in the 70s and 80s, you had that mindset where you chose to teach your kids to look beyond, everything that causes disturbances and differences in people.
Right.
That was wonderful. They couldn't have asked for a better foundation and moral grounding. I think that was awesome.
You've got to learn to think outside the box sometimes. You can't, this is the way it's going to be because it's always been this way. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Time changes, situations change, the world is changing. So, and I couldn't stand to see my children unhappy. I couldn't stand to see my daughter unhappy. Bobby had his friends. Bobby is a gregarious, Deepak, our outgrowing gregarious person. He had fun. He had his friends and had a good time. Pooja was the one, because the onus of the family's honor is always on the shoulders of the girl. And because of the family we came from, I don't know. I just couldn't fathom my sisters-in-law or anybody hearing of she's going out with boys or she's socializing with boys. Because when I got married, the talk in the family was, we have a girl from Delhi now. Now let's see how that works out. Not realizing this girl from Delhi is a Desi. What is the big deal about being from Delhi? But anyhow, that's a long and short of my 70s.
We'll talk more about that in our next segment, Kaam Ki Baat, because of all the career choices you could have made, you chose the hardest job in the world, that of being a parent. Staying at home with kids in a country like America is also a choice that somebody makes for whatever reasons, and then you realize that being a parent, being a wife, being a mother, being a homemaker, as thankless a job as that truly is, it's also the most rewarding job in the world.
Absolutely.
And the kind of sacrifices and struggles that one makes, it's nothing to sneeze at. So when folks look at this program, people watch this, they sometimes wonder if this is only meant for women who have accomplished a great deal outside of home, snazzy titles, CIO, CEOs, whatever it is. And that's not the case. I believe that the hardest job in the world for any parent is that, parenting,
It's
staying home.
parenting. Right.
So I would love to learn more about your experiences as a parent in ways that can help shed some light for parents who are watching the show.
There's no magic wand. There's no magic wand. There isn't a formula that's bottled up and sold at the stores. It's the dynamics of every family are different. And just good old common sense. Look at it from the point of view of the children also. You can't be stuck in, I'm the mother, I said so, that's why. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. I don't want to be a friend to my children. I'm their parent. They have lots of friends. But you walk a thin line. You walk a thin line between being a friendly parent or being someone who just my way or the highway. Our generation raised the kids still steeped in our own culture, our identity, our methodology. But I see young parents who are raising kids now have a better handle on it. They have a better handle on it because they are better informed than we were because of social media, because of the internet. There is so much information available now. The other day, someone was telling me, I looked up how to avoid clashing with your teenagers. And this was for immigrants, dual culture. When you're raising kids in a dual culture, how do you manage difference of opinion? We didn't know that. We had no clue about it. So your generation with young kids now is handling it in a much different way. And I believe in a better way. First of all, because of the information that's available. And another thing I've seen is from my children and their friends having their families, you explain everything to the children. You explain more to them than we ever did. And I think that's a very good point. That's an excellent way of handling it. Because when you tell them why you're making the decisions you're making, or why something is a certain way, or why there are different rules for different families, they accept it. They accept it more readily. With us, it was different. It was because we didn't see any, why do I have to explain to him? My parents never explained anything to me. So we were in that mindset. Now, maybe because of the way we, lack of a better word, we treated them. Because of that, they've chosen a different path. They're more informed. They're more accepting of the children wanting to have discussions with you and not agreeing with everything that you say. And I think that's a very good way of handling it. I have a 16-year-old, the older one, my oldest grandson, is graduating from Ohio State this year. Pooja's oldest boy, Sajjan, wants to have, he does a lot of stuff in the aeronautics field. He wants to pursue that. And he said, the first thing I would love to have is I'll have to have an aeroplane. And it was over my dead body. You're not going to go flying solo. You're not. And he said, but Nani, why? And I said, don't talk to me about it. I was horrified. And we were at a friend's house, the Ahujas, and Monty asked him, so what about you? What about your future plans? And he said, I want to pursue a career in aeronautics. My mother and my nanny are vehemently opposed to my suggestion that one day I would like to buy a small plane. When you're working with planes, you need to have one. You need his, argument. And I said, don't encourage them. Don't encourage him into, you have to have the plane and you have to, whatever it is. Just don't encourage him. And Sajjan looked at me and he said, Nani, if you were only to explain it to me or listen to my explanation, we wouldn't be having this argument. I didn't know what to say. Because he was absolutely right. Explain to them. I said, it's a safety thing. It's all kinds of reasons I gave him. But he said, well, ultimately, it's going to be my decision. And I said, okay. But his mother, she was, of course, the safety thing was the main thing. And she said, when the time comes, as we are closer to it, we will have robust discussions and then we'll decide. You decide. He said, no, we'll not decide. I will decide. And okay, that's it. We have to accept that at 16, they know a lot more at 16 than we did at 16. We didn't. We couldn't have these conversations, so much depth in their conversations, so much sense in their discussions. And I don't want to call it arguments because we stopped right there. But they make a lot of sense. And we have to give them the credit of making sense. And having a discussion is okay. Having a discussion is okay. That's how you learn. It's when you get into an argument that's to determine who is right. Discussion is to determine what is right. Argument goes into who is right, and that's something you can never win. So they're very respectful, but they respectfully disagree with you. They're not crossing that line. So I think this generation is doing, has a better handle on parenting than we did.
I think this is going to be very helpful to a lot of parents who are listening to you talk and really looking at where they need to step back, step away, and where they need to have those lines of communication always open with their children.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's all about that emotional connection that you build, and everything else kind of just falls aside as they're growing up, because they're not going to be teenagers forever, right? And they're also going to grow out of that and learn, be more responsible. But definitely, you have to pick your battles and do it sensibly. So thank you so much for sharing those pearls of wisdom, Munaji. And now we'll move on to our next segment in this journey, which is your X Factor. I'd love to learn a little more about your involvement with FICA and also aspects of your personality which are very central to you.
What got me involved with FICA first, like I said, was the workshops that we did with the children. And then after a long gap, we wrote for a grant and we got from the Asian Inc. We got from them, and we had a workshop on women's health. We didn't want to call it, we didn't want to give it a name where the men felt threatened. So we said women's, I forget now what it was, but it was for the Sikh community, the women in there, because the person who was approaching the grant writing and all was from the Sikh community. So we did one called The Power of Kaur. Kaur is, the middle name of Sikh women. And that was my second one, where we had speakers from all over the country who came and talked of their experiences and how they got out of the cycle of domestic violence and drugs, and they were on their feet now and they've become motivational speakers. So that was the second one. Third, the same gentleman, Paramjit Singh, who used to do the radio program with me, once we met somewhere and he said, how about if we start, I don't know what led to the conversation, was how about if we start a thing called Project Seva, and we try to feed people who live in challenged areas and who are facing challenges. And by the end of the month, the welfare checks run out. If they don't go to shelters to eat, they're not going to eat that day. So we started, four of us, Paramjit and his wife Linda, I count them as one, Bhushan Vadva, Raj Mathur, and myself. We were the founding members of Project Seva 37 years ago. It started off with just feeding at churches, and then we evolved and we included shelters. First, it was just a meal that we gave on Thanksgiving Day, which went on to become every month we would sponsor a meal. And the beauty of it is, Anu, every penny came from the Indian community. We did not reach out to banks or corporations or foundations. It was funded by moms and pops. That was the beauty of it. And then we expanded the services to blankets on, we used to do it on Martin Luther King's birthday till that's the end of winter in February. So we started doing it on Mahatma Gandhiji's birthday. So we would give out blankets, go to shelters, homeless people, we would go under the bridges and distribute blankets to them. Then we included hygiene packages. These are subsequently, in 37 years, there have been many chairpersons that have changed over the time, and each one brings their own flavor into it. So in the course of that time, a lot of different things were added. But none of this money goes to any individual. We buy the products. There's no middleman, no nothing, no overhead. We buy the products, we go and deliver them to the shelters or the churches. So every penny goes towards helping the needy. That's Project Seva, and I'm glad to say it's surviving. It's doing very, very well. And like I said, every chairperson brings his or own flavor into it, and we've had some excellent people leading the cause because they believe in it. And so that is one. The second thing was Dr. Gidwani, Dr. Jaya Shah, and myself. I forget the occasion. I think it was my home or something, and we just had lunch and we were talking about how a gentleman in my community had made dinner after he lost his wife. He was an elderly gentleman. He lost his wife, and he was very proudly telling us at the Gurdwara that he made kidney beans, rajma. And he said, but the color, he said, I went to Mark's, I got the can, but the color didn't look the same. So I put ketchup in it. And it looked the way she made it, but it didn't taste like hers. And it tugged at our heartstrings that here was this elderly person who had nobody to turn to for a simple meal. Jaya told us she was going to the Cleveland Clinic because there were some patients from India that were here, and their families, they were from a Jain family, and they needed food. So she said, I've asked a few of my friends to make this food, and we're going to take it to the clinic. And Gita had a similar story. And I said, I have to go to Mark's to get a gift card so I can give it to a young mom who needs money for food. And suddenly there was a hush in the room. And we realized that there is so much need. There is so much pain. And nothing in place where they can reach out to somebody or some phone number where we can help them. So we had multiple meetings at different locations, north, south, east, west of Cleveland. and we gathered a whole bunch of volunteers. Quite a few signed up, and we started a little, lack of a better word, a mom and pop help counter. Word of mouth and strict confidentiality. The word went around. Jaya again still took charge of the meals that a lot of Indians and Pakistanis were coming here for treatment, but they wanted their own food. So Jaya took care of that part. She would get volunteers who would, make quick meal and deliver it to them or point them in the right direction as to they wanted groceries where they could cook themselves and stuff. We got some requests for funding, and we started with zero budget, and we wanted to keep it that way. So Geeta looked into foundations where they would get good faith loans if they needed. And I got into the counseling part of it because there was a great need. The women, the young brides who were coming, horrific experiences they had. So I got into the counseling part of it. It went on for a good 12, 13 years. And then the needs of the community grew. So, and they got a little more serious. They were beyond our pay grade. So we decided to come under the umbrella of FICA. So people who were donating would get, 501c. They would get a tax deduction. And we called in a few other people to give Helping Hands a structure. One of them, it was the two decisions we made that year were the best. One was to come under the umbrella of FICA, the service arm of FICA. And the second one was to include one of our community members, Mala Garg, who gave this Helping Hands tremendous, she gave it structure. So we've had 3 chairpersons who have Mala Garg, Poonam Punwani, and now Swati Sathe. They have chaired Helping Hands for the past 6 years. And where we just whoever called us, whatever was on the table, we addressed it. And now Helping Hands has evolved also in where we're tackling much more serious issues. Domestic violence is something we tackle. And Angan was born out of the COVID. And that is the Zoom meetings we have with for the seniors. It's very interesting. It addresses a lot of subjects and health-related, hobbies-related. We have some light sessions also, but then some that very, very useful. So Angan was born out of that. And so these 2, I am deeply involved with being founding members. I'm on their boards, and those are the 2 things. Then I've done a couple of one fundraiser for ICG, India Cultural Gardens. So in an indirect way, I was involved with them also. So this is my involvement with FICA. And with Helping Hands, what we're trying to do is promote small groups getting together and forming sort of a support group. And we're trying that. The first time we're meeting is next Wednesday. I'm trying it with the Gurdwara group first. And a lot of them are alone. They are lonely. Some live with the children, but the children go to work. They don't have She said, there are times when I don't talk to anybody. A lot of them said that. I hosted a lunch at my place and wanted to just sort of break the ice and see what their issues were, what they would be open to. And they were all very receptive. And they said, yes, we will get together. And we're not giving it a name. We're not calling it a support group or anything, because that puts them in a position of, we need help. And not everybody is wired to put that out there, that this person needs help, because it's a sign of weakness then. So I'm just calling it a group that's going to get together and chit chat. We can exchange ideas. That's all we're trying to do. So this is the first one that we're forming. It will eventually, of course, be a byproduct of Helping Hands. I'm going to talk to some people in the temple and see if we can start something on a very small scale, just getting them together, having a cup of tea and a biscuit, and just talking. Sometimes all you need is just someone to talk to. You may not have an issue, you may not have a problem, but just talking about things that you're feeling, you realize, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's going through this. Because I myself, after my husband passed, I was in total isolation. The only people I met were my daughter, my son, my family. That's it. Didn't want to meet anybody. And solitude, isolation, as they say, can be dangerously addictive. And keeping that in mind, we realized that a lot of these women in the Gurdwara, and I'm focusing on the Gurdwara because that's my contact, but a lot of them are totally, completely isolated. They're not, it's a form of depression, and they don't want to, I don't want to give it a name for them, because I mentioned it to one and she said, no, I'm not depressed. I'm fine. I'm not depressed. But they exhibit complete signs, total signs of a depression. So in whatever way we can help, that's all we're trying to do.
It's so heartwarming to see you involved in so many of these initiatives, and to know that you were part of the founding team, the team that started so many of these projects that we hear about, Helping Hands and Project Seva. Those are very popular initiatives.
To give the women of our community credit, they're all equally passionate about this. It's because I didn't work outside the home. I didn't have other distractions. Whenever something presented itself, we took it and ran. But I salute all the women of our community. Having started it is okay, so we started it. But to sustain it and to bring it to where it is today, that takes courage. That takes hard work. Just starting it is not the main thing. Sustaining it. We always worked as a team.
Right.
The entire team that we gathered around us all worked hard towards it. And like I said, being a founding member means just that. You're a founding member, that's it. Sustaining it and working hard. Because after a while, I think the passion and the dedication and all, there is a tendency for it to wear off. It doesn't, your level of involvement and dedication and all, it wavers depending on what's going on in your life. But these selfless-hearted women who are carrying it through with much more dedication, I salute all of them. They all deserve.
Absolutely. Well said. That is absolutely true. There is compassion burnout. You you can't sustain anything forever. So
Right.
that's how you bring the
Exactly.
fresh blood into the picture. That's how
You
new
have to. Yeah.
ideas have to come in.
Because for change is essential for growth. Change is essential. You've got to evolve. You've got to make changes, and that's how you grow. That's how you learn.
But also having that
Ex-
dialogue is necessary. You know, getting perspective, getting wisdom,
Yeah.
experience is a great teacher. So
Right.
you
Right.
to stay active and involved in all these areas and share your experiences with the newer members, I think is a great idea, and I'm sure you're doing that. You're staying active in the community in that way.
Yeah.
It's fun. All right, Munaji, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I would love to segue into our next segment, which is this is self-care, and I want to know what you're doing to stay active, engaged, energized, and taking care of yourself at the 4 levels that I talk about: mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. How are you taking care of yourself?
I take care of myself depending on the mood I'm in. If I'm in a mood to go to the community center, we used to, in the house, we had the treadmill and the bike and everything. So that took care of a lot of things. In the apartment, I don't have that space. So go to the community center if I feel like it. Like I said, it depends on the mood I'm in. If I want peace and tranquility, I find myself going to the shores of Lake Erie and just sitting there, and it gives me a lot of comfort. It gives me a lot of peace, and sometimes I get my answers from there too. I'm a faith-based person, totally and completely and absolutely. I get my answers from my faith. One of the tenets of Sikhism is seva, service to humanity. That's my driving force. I'm an extrovert. I love being with people. I love engaging in dialogue, meaningful, productive dialogue. I'm sorry to say that, the frivolous kind of talk is okay. But so I started a little group in the building, current affairs. So didn't want any rabid Democrat or Republican or independent or anything. We just want to discuss current affairs. That's about it. So there are days when I feel I just want to be with people. I'm not a very disciplined person. I'm just not. So I go to the temple, like that takes care of my spiritual needs. I listen to the broadcast from India starts at 5 a.m. in the morning. So I listen to my prayers from Amritsar. Physical is walking. And if I feel like going, I go to the senior center and just chit chat with people there, and a little bit of treadmill, a little bit of whatever is available. I do that. And that's about it. I'm not. There are times when I will admit I can sit and watch YouTube for hours, but my interest is I'm a history buff and a political junkie. I listen to I watch on YouTube debates between the old timers, John Kenneth Galbraith, who was the ambassador to India, who was Jacqueline Kennedy's brother. I listened to talks by scholars on various subjects. I don't want anybody's opinion on it. I want to hear what someone has researched in and take it from there. So I dabble in a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I just want a stress-free, maintenance-free existence now.
I love that. I love that. I think you're a free spirit.
And
I
music.
applaud you for starting the current affairs. I think that sounds like a lot of fun. If there is any information that you can share, I'd love to be part. At least, I think that's a great way for women to stay connected with what's going on in the world and read up. And it's like you said, not just the small talk and the frivolous talk, but also engaging in something that keeps your mind agile, active.
Right. Life is all about learning. At whatever stage of life you're in, you're learning, you're engaged, you're alive.
100%. Wow. It's been such a joy and pleasure talking to you. I love the authenticity and the wisdom that you have brought to the show.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that, Olaji. Before we conclude our session, any parting shots for our audience? Anything that you want to talk about?
I don't know if I have any words of wisdom, as you keep saying, but stay involved with things that might not be of a direct benefit to you. Don't always look at personal benefit. Look at the greater good that it's going to do for your community. Always, my passion is also getting a seat at the table. When the population of Asians in Solon is 13%, yet we have nothing to show for it. So demand a place at the table. Be a part of the dialogue. Be a part of the dialogue. And don't always look for personal gain. Look for the greater good of the community. And that's reward in itself. That's a reward in itself. And listen to what the children have to say. We're not always right. The children have smarts more than us in some ways.
Well said. Well said. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and really sharing those words of wisdom. I think there is so much we can learn from you. And it's great for you to please be involved and stay involved in the community because some of the issues that you've touched upon are absolutely essential. And everybody who's listening to this podcast, listening to you talk, I hope they reach out to you and really have this dialogue about how do we do this, and this. There's some great ideas that have come out of this conversation, to have you at the table and have you lead the way and show some direction would be a great idea. I really applaud you again for all the things you're doing for the community and you've done in the past. It's been a joy. Thank you so much for coming. And
thank you.
Great one.
Thank you.